students who have walked out of classes at the UTM campus, and they are calling on the vice principal, Alexandra Gillespie, to come down and address their concerns. And their concerns speak to the fact that they have been feeling threatened on campus, which is why they have gathered together. They have been feeling that the administration has been silencing them and not supporting them. And there's been accusations that there are statements that they made in support of the Palestinian struggle, in support of the attacks on Palestine. Like the minister, Jay.
Take a moment of silence.
Have actually counter-terrorism. So they are protesting that silencing and that attacks. And now they're taking a minute of silence for all of the Palestinian people who have been murdered and killed, and the ongoing genocide that's happening right now in Palestine. So we are seeing a huge gathering of students. I'm thinking they're about probably, Felipe, can you turn the camera around? Like turn it, can you turn the camera around, Felipe? So that it's,
everybody knows the principal was supposed to come down.
Felipe, can you tell us what's happening now, please?
But you just back down on it.
One second.
Decided not to come.
The principal is not coming down, so we're having a little issue here. Am I able to join at a later time to explain everything that's happening?
But just give us a little, just tell us why you're out there. Let people hear why you have gathered.
We have gathered because the UTMSU issued a statement condemning Israeli government policies in Gaza and the genocide and ethnic cleansing that's happening. And the University of Toronto Mississauga and the principal Gillespie condemned that statement. And the minister, Jill Dunlop, Minister of Colleges and Universities of Ontario, she doxed and named members of the UTMSU executive in the legislature. Students felt like their voice was taken away. They felt like they were censored and they wouldn't be able to talk about these issues. So they asked us to gather here and do a silent, safe walkout and protest to express our frustrations and just be able to gather as a community. We read a letter to the principal that you folks heard a little bit of it. We hope that she addresses us at some point in time because she was meant to come down here and address the crowd, but she didn't. And right now we are just gathering here. I think we're going to move to the student center and do some healing as a community and move forward from there.
Thank you very much, Felipe. Know that Scholar Strike and the entire Scholar Strike of Canada is in solidarity with the students at UTM and students everywhere. Right now, we know that in Montreal, students have also walked out in support of the Palestinian people and against the ongoing suppression of voices of students and faculty. So Scholar Strike Canada stands with you. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Bye-bye.
Thank you, everyone. Bye-bye. Bye, Professor.
Bye-bye. Bye. Okay. So we can now start with our panel. Thank you all. You can turn your cameras on, and Jen and Justine.
Sorry, turn the cameras on, or?
I'm asking people to turn their cameras on now.
Sure.
Because the panel starts now, and and it's running now. Is it running now?
I'm just having to refresh the
Okay.
page because there's a lag. There's a little bit of a lag between the Zoom and the
Okay. Yeah. Yeah, it happened. Yeah.
Oh yeah, it's working now.
Okay. Okay, great. And okay. Okay. Is there an echo? Okay. Jen, is everything okay on that side, or it's still hi all. Hi Jeffrey. Hi ST Smythe. We've not met, but I've heard a lot of you about you. Thank you for being here. And hi Kristen. So you will let us know when it starts, Jen, and I will take my camera and my mic off. I have to come back in with Faith.
I think we are live, Bev. We're on.
We're on? Okay, great. Okay, I'll get out.
Thanks.
Okay, good.
Are we good? There we go. Okay. Hey, good afternoon, everyone. It's great to be with you here today. It was awesome to see UTM students just walk out just now, led by the Executive Director of UTM SU, Felipe. We are so grateful you are doing the work that you are doing on campus, and we hope the Principal Gillespie comes to meet with you soon. My name is Kristen Boss. I'm really excited to be here with you all today on behalf of Scholars Strike Canada. We are talking about extractivism and the university today, and all of the many tentacled relationships that puts us in as Indigenous and Black scholars, activists, land protectors. Today we are going to hear from Professors S.A. Smythe, Jeffrey Ansloos, and land protector, educator, and filmmaker Layla Staats. I thought today we could be pretty conversational. So I thought the first thing we do is I'll give everyone a chance to introduce themselves. And then we've got a couple questions that can ground our conversations. S.A., did you want to get us started? Is that all right? Or Jeff, anyone?
Sure. Hello, everyone. My name is S.A. Smythe. I was hired to the University of Toronto Faculty of Information in July 2022. So I'm here in more than solidarity, being invited in to the Scholars Strike by folks on this call and beyond it. Thank you, Kristen. But also very clearly as a newcomer, someone with deep familiarity, embodied and otherwise with university structures, but a newcomer here above the 49th parallel here in Canada. And I'm really excited to be in conversation with you all today.
Should I go next? Okay. It's nice to meet you, Essay. And my name is Jeffrey Ansloos. I also presently live here in the city of Toronto, but my family comes from Winnipeg, which is where I was born and raised on Treaty 1 territory. I belong to Fisher River Cree Nation. I guess before saying anything else today, I just want to sort of reiterate trying to live out our philosophies as Cree people. I'm very deeply committed to thinking about the good life, mio pimatiswin and mio wikotowin, good relations. And as I understand it, to be in good relations with one another, to nourish life here and now is to be committed to the end of extractivism, colonialism, fascism, apartheid, genocide, bombardment, siege, and occupation, which are all threats to good life and being in good relation. And so I think these teachings invite our solidarity as Cree people. to those who struggle in the face of social abandonment. The good life is also for Palestine, and Palestine will be free. Vocationally, I'm an educator. I'm a psychologist. I'm a writer. I work at the University of Toronto as an associate professor of Indigenous health at OISE, and I also work as a Canada Research Chair in critical studies in Indigenous health, where I also lead the Critical Health and Social Action Lab, a center dedicated to Indigenous community-led research for health justice. I'm really grateful to be here with you all today.
Sago, I am here. Sorry, this panel just came right at the time of school pickup. So I was like, well, I hope that I can get home before we have to talk, but that wasn't the case. So I'm just gonna pull over here to the side and introduce myself. So Sago, my name is Layla Staats. I am Mohawk Turtle Clan from the Six Nations of the Grand River. A filmmaker, an activist, a musician, an artist, a mom, juggling a lot of schedules, a lot of craziness. And so people ask me, like, how do you have time to do the work that you do? And that's one thing. When you have a relationship, you create this relationship with water, with land, that it's not just a resource. It's not just something to extract or something to profit from or buy or sell or trade, but it's a relative. It's a family member. Then, when your family is under attack, what do you do? When your family is being poisoned and killed, what do? You protect them, and you protect them with all of your heart. So that's what I've done. My recent film, Boil Alert, just had its world premiere at TIFF, and we're really excited about that. I traveled to First Nations communities all over Turtle Island that had boil water advisories, and looked at the deeper impacts, the social, the mental health, seriously, the residual impacts, these ripple effects of not having access to clean water. And the film has just been massively, incredibly received, very powerful, very emotional. And I think that kind of speaks to what needs to happen. We have to put our heart into this to actually see change. And for me, it's not going to come from, a magic wand from the top down. It's going to come from a rise in the ground up, from all of us doing the work, continuing to have these conversations, continuing to listen to these conversations. So I'm just grateful that everyone's here. And hopefully I should be home and parked in like five-ish minutes. So I'll be good to go. But I know that these guys can carry on the conversation, and we'll come back and talk about, what led me to getting arrested on the front line, what led me to, making this film and being so passionate about the defense of our Mother Earth. So thank you so much. I'm gonna get on the road and get home real quick.
Thanks so much, Layla. I'll see you in a couple minutes. Also just realized I did not introduce myself, if anyone is wondering. My name is Kristen. I'm Métis. I was born and raised and adopted here in Takaranto, but my family is from Northern Alberta in Treaty 8 territory. I also work at the University of Toronto as an assistant professor, teach Indigenous feminisms and Indigenous science technology studies. I also co-direct the Technoscience Research Unit, which is an Indigenous-led space in the university, where we center relationships between colonialism, science, and Indigenous self-determination. We work on extraction in Chemical Valley. And one thing I wanted to say is that our lab, the Environmental Data Justice Lab, which we house in the Technoscience Research Unit, was itself inspired by and through the support of Palestinian artists, technologists, and scholars at Visualizing Palestine, who many years ago taught us how to use data to visually represent colonial violence, and that our research work and practice emphasizes the building of solidarities across uneven geometries of injustice, and of course, opposing genocide, ethnic cleansing, racism, colonialism in all of its forms. And wanted to kind of open with that, as I think we all have, that the work we do is in relationship to each other and to our kin across the sea and beyond. Layla, when you're back, I really want to play a trailer to Boil Alert, but I'll wait until you're here to do that. The first question I thought we could talk about is just simply how we're working with and thinking about extraction from our various positionalities and the work we're doing in and out of the university. You've all said a little bit something of it, but I know that you think about it in more complex ways. Jeff, did you want to get us started maybe?
Sure. I had some notes so that my thoughts, as convoluted as they might be today, are somewhat structured. I really appreciate the question. I think about extraction and extractivisms in a number of different ways, but centrally, my work in the last few years has turned to examine the intersections of extractivism, particularly in the context of mining industries, agricultural industries, and hydroelectric industries, and across Turtle Island and around the world, and their impacts on the social and affective dimensions of Indigenous people's health. Across Canada and indeed globally, the struggle of Indigenous peoples against both personal and planetary annihilation often brings us face to face with the violent nature of capitalism and its current configurations within extractive industries. But more simply put, or clearly put, the land and the water, like us, are hurting. The repercussions of relentless exploitation of our lives and of the planet are painfully evident across all scales: local, regional, national, and global. The web of connections that links deforestation in the Amazon with melting ice caps in the circumpolar regions of Canada, or the overproduction of industrial waste with the rise of disease in our fisheries, or bringing it closer to home in places like Ontario, the stakes couldn't be any higher. Global extractivism is manifest in the floods due to hydrodamming. It's wildfires, exacerbated drier weather conditions, and increasingly frequent severe heat waves, which threaten the entire stability of ecosystems. It's in the frequent blight and water and soil contaminations from industrial activities throughout Chemical Valley. It's once even improbable weather conditions or events like cyclones now increasing. I think if we look and we let ourselves feel, we know that the land and the water, like us, are hurting. And so my research, the work that I do with the Critical Health and Social Action Lab, seeks to try to comprehend the complexities of living amidst life-threatening danger posed by extractivism. It delves into how we as people and as communities experience, adapt to, maneuver within, and resist these resource exploitation practices, while also challenging the dominant view about who bears responsibility for environmental, social, and health harms, as well as their remediation. And so when I speak of extractivism, which, I think in environmental studies and other disciplines that I don't work directly in is often immediately framed from a more tangible material perspective around mining or deforestation or dams, I think essentially in my work has, it's turned to the impacts on things that are often unseen, affective dimensions of health, or what I more frequently talk about as mental health. And while, certainly in my field, there's a tendency to dematerialize and to abstract something as embodied as mental health, I don't have that luxury, because the issue that I research most squarely is the issue of suicide. And my personal and professional proximity to the materiality of death is something that keeps me soberly grounded in the fact that affective dimensions of extractivism are felt and embodied. So I approach mental health from this materialist perspective, and I think about depression and desolation and the desire to die, and even deaths by suicide, as a reflection of our certain precarious structural position within a system of compounding multi-scalar violence. And my research is showing the impacts of things like mining. It's showing the impacts of things like infrastructural abandonment by the state, in vital public water systems and food systems. It's showing the impacts of exposure to generations of environmental violences as having tremendous impacts on health and on mental health, and demonstrated relationships with the increased rates and risks for suicide in some First Nations and other Indigenous communities across Canada. So that's one place, and a prominent place where I am continuing to think and to work with colleagues, students at the university as we try to better understand that relationship, politicize that relationship more explicitly, and to ultimately build evidence for communities in our collective struggle against extractive violence against our lands, waters, and us as a people. And I think our liberation from colonialism is intimately connected with our awareness of those kinds of land-based intimacies. How our bodies feel in context is crucial to contributing to what tools we have available in our liberation, and how we respond to issues like suicide or other health and social reflections on our structural situation. But I'm also really interested in thinking about extractivism as a worker in a university context, thinking about the ways that the privilege and power and economic position of universities like the one that employs me are built upon the sustainability of extractive industries, the endowments, the pensions, even the research chairs that are funded are inextricably linked to the exploitation of Indigenous peoples' lands and waters, and indeed our lives all around the world, from Turtle Island to Palestine. And so, yeah, I think, and as a worker in a lab environment, I think a lot about how extraction plays out both intimately and proximally, and how we work together, more epistemically in the exploitations of systems of knowledge, particularly the knowledges of Indigenous people, and ultimately the movement of capital through these institutions and our responsibilities to to resist that kind of complicity and violence. So maybe I'll pause there, take a breath, and let others speak to it, but I hope that gives you a sense of where I'm coming from.
Yeah, that gives a really fulsome sense. You know, I love your work, and I'm so grateful for the work you're doing into the affective and material effects of extractivism that we feel in our bodies. I think a common resource that we both love, and that maybe folks watching would love, is the Native Youth Sexual Health Network's toolkit, Violence on the Land, Violence on Our Bodies, building an Indigenous response to environmental violence, really looking in the impacts of mining and infrastructure, and also politicizing that relationship. Like those, that happens for a reason, because at least in Canada and around the world, we see a privileging of that company-state relationship, obviously, over our own bodies. Essay, I know you're also thinking about these questions intimately. Would you like to?
Yeah, sorry, I'm still thinking about what Jeff has offered us. I'm gonna try to enter. And in the spirit of conversation, you know, Jeff, I really liked what you were saying, and I mean, just all of it really resonated on just very many levels. I'm still processing. But when we're talking about, like Kristen, the affective register, thinking about embodiment, I think that's one of the core ways that I enter into thinking about extraction and extractivism. And there are two things I'm going to try to say about that, because after giving a really I think full, but even if partial breadth of the ways that you are thinking about it, you also said, also interested in thinking about that in relation to the university. So I'll ground there and then branch back out as as I've said, I'm new to this particular institution, but in the words of Your mayor, I think, Aubrey Graham, new to it, but not new to it, but true to it, right? And that's Drake for those of you taking notes. I think about it materially and directly. I thought about it over a year ago when I was recruited and hired to this particular place as an assistant professor of Black Studies and the Archive, where Black Studies has been defanged, deracinated, and de-resourced across Turtle Island and certainly across Canada, where Black Studies as a formation does not exist on a federal level. So to be a professor of Black Studies and the Archive was for me a site of possibility, but as well as one of deep awareness of possibility of what it would mean as the 100% appointed faculty member within the Faculty of Information at the University of Toronto of African descent, wedded to Black Studies, motivated and galvanized by it at every turn, certainly within and beyond the university. What I mean to say there is most immediately, in relation to this space, I thought about what it means to bring a set of stakes and a set of questions to a place that does not have the range or capacity to attend to them. And that is not to critique directly my particular faculty, nor certainly not my colleagues within it, but rather to talk about the grounds that we are asymmetrically organized into and onto in relation to university life, which is to say a compounded extraction in ways that Jeff has already pointed to, in ways I know we might go on to discuss as we even move beyond the institution, as the institution moves beyond us and over us certainly, which is to say, the work that happens in Black Studies is not representative or representational work. What does it mean then to be the one representative of a group that is seen to be one-to-one with a field of study, and indeed then an object of its inquiry, which is not the Black study that I know, nor the Black studies as a field formation. The one that I enter into is one that C.L.R. James spoke of in 1970 in a journal for the Black Scholar, a special issue interview, where he said that Black studies is a critique of Western civilization. Now, if we know that Babylon and its ideologies moves the world over, makes a world and unmakes a world over, then it also is to say that who we are, wherever we are on the in relation to or in deep invested relation to Black life, Black people, our cosmologies and knowledges, and the ways that we move in solidarity towards life, the good life that Jeff talked to us about. It is then to say that the stakes should be one of university principles concern, but we know that that is not the case. So that is one thing that I think about and try to communicate in my pedagogical practices and the conversations that I have with people that get coerced into extractivist relation when representation is all that we can see, when it becomes, well, I read XYZ Black writer, can I take a class? Or I haven't read enough about your culture or people to know. When simultaneously the university extracts our embodiment, extracts our personhood, our lives. I think of Barbara Christian, I think of Cedric Robinson, I think of Sylvia Wynter, I think of Audre Lorde, I think of too many to name, Kamal Brathwaite, I think of Edouard Lusant. When I think about the lives, I think about France Fanon, who is certainly on our minds today as we misarticulate what violence may or may not mean, and who is the arbiter of it in our lives today, in our histories, about the lives rather that were snuffed out in relation to university life and knowledge. Barbara Christian, a professor of UC Berkeley, felled before her prime, the same of many of the other names that I've mentioned. So I think about it in those material terms in relation to the university and how to make room. The twinned effect there is also by nature of having a set of ethical commitments related to my embodiment, but not begun from that place. Rather, like in the 1970s when the Combahee River Collective wrote of identity politics, several of whom are living today and liberalized, but that's for a different maybe panel. But the statement in its time and the way that those Marxist deeply anti-capitalist, anti-imperialist people, women, Black peoples, African peoples thought about what it meant to communicate a politic in relation to one's identity, how that has been itself extracted, co-opted, mismanaged, and neoliberalized in large part because of university extractivists, overwhelming cis heteropatriarchal and white supremacist thinking as a place that we organize in a relation to. We begin from, not we begin as. We do not end at identity, but rather it is our starting place. How do we think about that with the clamor for universitarian representation as an end goal, as opposed to not even a starting goal, but a site of repossession from a dispossessive set of modes and practices? So that is how I think about it in relation to university life, the impossibilities and possibilities that we are shuttled into in relation. More materially still, and still with the Black feminist ethic, as how I enter thinking about how the university has us having this conversation, not this particular one that we are having, but to even reflect on, well, I am Black, and therefore I do have a set of ethical commitments and attachment to Black peoples. I personally believe this. What the university also does to, against, and at our expense is to have us engage in a system of questioning that is itself, I would like to say, extractivist, which is why, Jeff, even though that's not fully where what I heard from your remarks, I sensed that possibility there, and something that needs to be meted out collectively, because individually is the ways that we are coerced into having that conversation. And it becomes extractivist when, you know, prior to this was a professor at UCLA, still untenured, and had conversations with people about what it meant to be on tenured faculty. You're supposed to have this conversation about going through the ranks, and you're supposed to like miss the forest for the trees in terms of where your end goal is supposed to be. It might have been community as you entered. You might have come with a grounded set of states, but tenure is what it becomes named. It becomes not what you owe to one another, in famous like early 20th century sloganeering in sort of Russian anti-imperial movement, that also made the grounds for solidarność. What is actual solidarity in an internationalist sense, in a red sense, but rather what can you do for me, and who are you doing it as? And so we say, as a Black man, as a Black woman, and not understanding that those positions are classed and grounded and antithetical to what it means to move towards nourishment, rather than to self-extract our identities for a diversity statement, to self-extract for a position, for a Mellon grant, for, I don't know, you got Shirk up here and what have you. And the deep hollowing out that it does to a people, of a movement, set of movements and communities is where I enter here. I also would like to say, I see Layla's back. I also would like to say on the ecological level, as that fundamentally, as someone who's moving with this kind of framework, thinking fundamentally of racial capitalism, of the extraction, not just of surplus of labor, but surplus of people, and how racialization is an imperial core part of that formation, that in my own work, organizing, studying, living, and being in life, in relation, and moving towards life with people, specifically in and across the Mediterranean, in the Caribbean and Central America, from where my people hail. We know, I feel really clearly that this is an environmental concern. It's an ecological concern, not purely in a universitarian sense, or even an intellectual, capacious sense, like what Toni Morrison has occasioned us to think about in terms of when we're thinking of ourselves as friends of mind and being in ecological relation to one another, shared cosmologies of possibility to a horizon of collective liberation where we are all to be free. It is also to say that my people know rivers and my people know seas. When I do work with people in and across the Mediterranean, people who've migrated or are seeking refuge from imperial horrors that the West has wrought, that brings them towards Europe, I go back to C.L.R. James and I think about the conceit of Black study as Western civilization and its critique. I think then about being there over the summer again, as I went to university. I've organized, I spent time with groups organizing civilian, which is a term for contention that I will just leave there, but civilian rescue missions, the non-state sanctioned rescue missions of migrants at sea, refugees and asylum seekers. The laws that I know from places like Italy and other places that inhabit jus sanguinis rather than jus soli, law of the blood rather than law of land or birthright citizenship. Even in a nominal sense, you can be born in the United States and nominally or legally a citizen, but we also know how that gets meted out. Whereas in places like Italy, it's still operating by descent in certain blood quantum ways that are attempting to keep the value of a citizen in one hailed in relation to centrally in relation to whiteness, but citizenship laws also open up when it comes to concerns of labor. Whenever Italy has needed labor, those are when Italy's migration laws, laws of citizenship, transitional temporary labor have been opened up. And now we are experiencing the ebb and tide of that possibility. The flow of surplus of people means unlikeliness to be rendered human, recognized as human, and allowed to live. And so the necropolitical project that I witnessed there and the people that insist on operating beyond borders and those extractivist, colonial, white settler, and so on regimes are essentially how I think about extractivism. And I do not, and I spent time talking about the university because it's Scholars Strike Canada. And I want us to be aware of this, just like Jeff is making these ecological embodied universitarian links, but this is the same project. If people know here on the call or might want to share after more material connections, I'm avoiding like speaking over, but not speaking from a place of familiarity from this context. But I do know that Raytheon and Halliburton and other such corporations are centrally in the same neoliberal financialization business of my alma mater and my first place of employment, which is the University of California. I know that the extraction into the ground of those places happen while meeting people out from getting an education, from being able to learn their own communities. I know that we think about extraction in terms of racial capital imperialism, colonial racial capitalism, and it gets us to questions like a land acknowledgement, where we think about who and what we acknowledge the land as, but I think then about the Move family, Tree and Delisha Africa, and the rest of their family, and how the remains are used by university anthropologists to say what it is that we're supposed to say we know about a corpse, a skeleton, or a body. So the name of science, which impacts me and my community, transkin, blackkin, indigenous relations, are university modes of extraction that impact us the world over, whether or not I accrue a salary at this place at this time. We know that the bombs and the missiles and the other artifacts of warmongering, death-making that are happening right now in Sudan, in Haiti, in Palestine, the world over, are being funded by tax dollars, by university tuition, by peer review for free journals and things like this. And I want to make sure that, I guess I'm just grateful to be here so that we can place these things in relation together and let people know that we know. Thank you.
Miigwech essay, as always, taking us on an expansive journey. It's funny, actually, you mentioned anthropologists and their particular obsession with bones. Yesterday in my grad class, we were again talking about the animacy or the right of land in context with that text Cooling the Tropics that just came out about ice in Hawaii. And we were talking about how Indigenous land doesn't have to have artifacts in it, doesn't have to have archaeological reports associated with it to be Indigenous or to belong to itself or to be a reason not to do extraction, right? Which is how we always see it. I'm going to come back to many things that you talked about, a movement of capital and our responsibilities in just a minute. Layla is back with us. Layla, I'm wondering, can we play the Boil Alert trailer? Would that be helpful in grounding your conversation?
Yeah, I was just going to say that would be a great introduction, and it would save me, kind of a lot of talking to give you an idea of the work that I've been doing and the experience that I've had that has, I wish that the documentary allows everyone to kind of go on that journey with me and learn, but I will just say it right now. I am not a scholar or a professor or, I'm a nerd and a scientist at heart, but, my path was very different. I was like a university dropout, and I thought, I had no value. I thought that I was deemed for minimum wage, crappy jobs my whole life, and that I didn't have a power or a purpose. So now, standing here and being able to create real change and do it from a place of heart and emotion and passion, that's something I'm proud of. I was like listening to you guys. I'm like, man, they are so smart. And you go in your head and you're like self-doubting. You're like, oh my gosh, I'm a dropout. I didn't even finish university. But then, I'm like, no, I have a reason. There is a purpose for me, and my voice is, and the experiences that I've seen in creating this film, and the extraction and the impacts that it has had on Indigenous communities is one that I can't unsee. I can't unknow that. And so if my whole job is to communicate that emotion of what I felt, what I learned, and how it is real and urgent, then I did my job. So yeah, let's play the trailer so you can have an idea, and then we'll come back and chat about it.
Let's do it. I don't think folks can see the chat, but as they did say regarding academic speak, it's an accent. Also, I was also a high school dropout, if that helps at all. We have two of them leading our lab, actually. But yeah, starts for all kinds. Okay, I'm gonna play. I hope it works. It is on Vimeo. Just give me 1 second. Okay. Okay. It's asking me to quit and reopen, which I don't want to do. Jen, I'm just wondering if I give you this link, can you play it for us? Yeah. Oh, actually, you know what? Maybe it actually is. We're good. Thanks.
I was seen as an outsider coming in to the reserve. I was an outsider everywhere. They call it the Red Road when you start to learn about your Indigenous culture. Sego Skano, Layla Black Young Yats, Hanawara, Ni Wagi Darodan, Ganyak Gehaga. I'm Ganyak Gehaga. I'm Mohawk. I am Mohawk. My papa always said, whoever has the clean water at the end, they're the ones that are going to thrive. Make sure that you figure out a way to get clean water. I'm looking at boil water advisories and I see every single one, First Nations, First Nations, First Nations, First Nations. And I just hear my papa in my head saying, now's the time. Our people need clean water. My hope for this journey is to understand why this is happening, as well as to discover who I am as an Indigenous woman, finding that voice within myself. What are some of the challenges that you're facing?
We've got bad water, and it's not safe to drink right now.
Checking into the hotel, first thing that I saw was the boil water advisory. Don't get it in your eyes, don't open your mouth in the shower. It's a reality check. How many generations has your family been drinking this water?
I know of 7 generations.
7 generations.
8 double loaders, and we got 2 of them running. We've got a problem with the flow of water in them.
These people live with it every single day.
We're in California, in the U.S., off the 101. You can go on either side and you can get clean water up and down, but here on the reserve, how is it that those guys don't have clean water?
Help's not coming. Never has.
What's your position here?
I'm the acting water supervisor.
Who does all the testing?
I do.
How many people do you have working here?
Currently 2. We just got a new guy yesterday.
This is where they dispose of the uranium.
A lot of the Navajos that lived along it are now dead from cancer. That's why you don't hear about it. They don't want to tell us. You have to find out on your own.
Water is not just a resource. We are not respecting it. We are not taking care of it.
These things were told to me by the elders. Maybe in your time, you'll see this, you'll see that. So I've been watching the earth and the vegetation and the birds, the insects. All of those things are telling me there are strange things happening. It's not like how it used to be.
Ew. So even like watching that trailer, every time I've watched a documentary, every film screening, I'm crying because it was real. You know, it was like I was sitting in their kitchen tables. I was sitting with their elders, their youth. I was living in their communities. And sorry, we got little ones coming in with scratches. Oh, that's it's all right. Mommy's just on a call. We'll put a Band-Aid on you. We got some at the house. Band-Aids solve everything. So yeah, it was a really like visceral experience for me living in Niskandiga. Niskandiga, if you've not heard of it, it's okay because most people haven't. Most people have no idea where it is, what it is, that it's even a place. This community just passed 10,000 days on a boil water advisory. That's 27 years. So these kids have never known clean drinking water. And when I sat down with them and I talked with them, you know, they say, feels like we don't exist. No one's coming to help them. No one's coming to fix the problem. No one cares. And no one even knows. Yet our government systems want the land. They want the resources there. They want, you know, this ring of fire and the roads and all of this, yet they are lacking basic human rights. And to sit with the chief, Chris Munoz, and to sit with him and hear him fall apart. He said to me, as soon as the cameras went off, he said, you know, I could tell he just needed to talk. He needed to let stuff out that he couldn't do when the camera's rolling. And he said, Layla, I have performed CPR on 27 youth in this community, and I haven't been able to save one. We are failing them. So there are communities in a state of emergency, not because of the water, but because of the youth suicide. So I'm really like, it makes me, I guess not happy, but it makes me glad that you guys are doing the research to see these effects, you know, to put it in science and labs, to see the suicidal effects, because it is an epidemic in these communities that have been used for resource extraction. In New Mexico, when I was down with the Hopi and the Navajo, you know, their relationship with water is so powerful. They, you know, they're a desert. There's not a lot of water. They would bring it into their homes. They would sing to it on the way in, and then they would use it like 4 or 5 times within the home before putting it out to the land, not wasting a single drop. And within 10 years of resource extraction, uranium mines, their water is radioactive. It is killing them. They call it the silent genocide because, you know, nobody's talking about it, but every single person in that community was either sick or had lost someone to cancer. We look at Grassy Narrows, and a paper mill up the river dumps mercury in the water, and an entire community for generations is poisoned. One thing I didn't know about mercury poisoning is that it actually affects the fetus inside the mother, and they get a higher concentration of poisoning. So these youths are growing up and they're having these issues, massive headaches, twitches in their face, depression, anxiety, suicide. That was one thing that our film, not intentionally, but tragically, really put a highlight to, was the youth that are struggling in these communities. One of the young ladies that we interviewed from Grassy Narrows, I won't ever forget her interview, because she was saying how it feels like a death sentence growing up with mercury poisoning, growing up in that community. But then at the end of her interview, she said, but this is the most beautiful place, Grassy Narrows. I will always be homesick. I will always be grateful that this is where I'm from. And that talks to the connection with the land. You know, I asked these elders, why, people say, why don't you move? If you want clean access to water, why don't you move to Thunder Bay? Why don't you move to a city? And this old man, he said, well, you know, all my kids have left. They took their kids, they went for a better life, and he's just there all alone. But he said, I want you to go to the water's edge at sunrise, and you will know why I stay here. So of course I listened. I woke up at sunrise, I walked to the water, and this crazy res dog that looked like a white wolf followed me. And I was like, oh, this is a sign, you know. And I watched the sunrise, and I could hear it. I could hear the land. I could hear the water. And I knew that that's why they can't leave, because the land knows them. They know the land. It is not just a place where they live. It is the place that they're in relationship with. So seeing these experiences and hearing them firsthand forever changed me. And the documentaries, it's a hybrid documentary. It's not like your typical, you know, that's what I thought. I was just going to hold a microphone and interview people. But every location, I felt myself changing. I felt myself growing. I felt myself healing and hurting at the same time. And you really go through that experience with me through my eyes, and we see it together. And it ends up with me being in a place where I have to take action. And a lot of the time, one thing I did learn from the Wet Sweatin', when I was out there with Frida Hewson, she walked me around her healing camp. She says, the one thing you must do is build infrastructure. We have got to move back to the land. We have to actually live off the land and create our spaces there that belong to us and take them back. Now, I mean, people ask me, why would you be willing to put your body on the line? You know, sniper rifles, attack dogs, automatic weapons, army, RCMP, all coming, this wall of colonial violence and domination on 8 land offenders on a bridge. You know, I won't ever forget it. And you know, why would you be willing to do that? Put your brand, put your reputation, get arrested, you know, how do you justify that? But when you taste that river, that Wenziqua, when you drink it right from the river, it's alive. It was electric. It was like lightning bolts through my whole body. And I was like, this is how water is supposed to be. How can we want to put a pipeline under it? How can we want to destroy it? Most of us will never, ever drink from a fresh water source. So I say that my job right now is, you know, the awareness business. When I was going through my my criminal proceedings, they actually changed my charges from civil charges to criminal charges. And one of the reasons was because I was using my social platform, my networks, to encourage others to break the law. I am not telling you to break the law. I am asking you to question whose laws you live by. Our society has been stuck in a colonial paralysis where we checked out, we let everyone else take care of us. They'll take care of the water, they'll protect the water, they'll give us energy, we just have taken a back seat. So now that awareness, once you know, you can't unknow. Once you know there are children that feel like they don't exist, once you know that there are entire communities dying of cancer and poisoning, you can't erase that from your memory. You can't unknow that. So as you know it, you suddenly question. And it's that active questioning. For so long, we haven't even asked where our money goes in the bank. We don't even think about our money in the bank. It's like we've totally disconnected from what that money is being used for. But the time for change is now. The time for us to wake up and get involved, ask questions. When we see something that isn't right, we say no. So standing on that bridge and getting arrested, it didn't change legislation. It didn't change laws. It didn't change the fact that they're still drilling that pipeline. But what it did is it showed that we can say no. And when we say no, it matters. And inspiring others when we all say no together. We've been programmed to think that we're small, we're weak, we're just one person. What can one person do to save the earth? What can one person do to save the water? But that is intentional. That is made to divide us, to take away our power. When we actually look at it, we are the 97%. We are the majority. So when we unify our voices to question these corporations, to question these banks, to hold them accountable, to let them know that we know, and we're not going to unknow until something changes. I think that power of resistance, that power of actually saying no, that's something that, I'll never forget, even though whatever consequences that I've had to deal with, that moment of saying no, it meant something. And it meant something to my kids who, are proud of their mom, who's a water protector. And it meant something to every single person that I meet, that I tell this story to. So I've actually been doing a lot of work with different universities on the process of, criminalizing land offenders and how it is systematic, these injunctions, these legal documents that are basically taking the side of large corporations, the money, following the money, and these acts of division within our communities that have allowed the process. You take a nickel and you throw it in the middle of a starving community, of course they're going to fight for it. And you create these divisions in Indigenous communities with the implementation of band council, basically the ripping of people's communities and their culture, implanting, these crazy divisions. There's so many that I can't even talk about, the lateral violence that happens inside Indigenous communities. But that is the intent of colonialism, so that we forget how powerful we are together. And even as, non-Indigenous, as Black, as queer, as white, as allies, as settlers, we all have a voice. We all have a responsibility. I was in Paris for World Water Day as part of an international delegation for water protectors. I sat at this table where people from South Africa, from Chile, from Mexico, from Brazil, and me from Canada all sat at this table with translators in our ear, speaking different languages, but sharing the same experiences. In Chile, if you have enough money, you can buy a river. So what are the wealthy doing? Buying all the rivers, damming the rivers, processing the water, selling the water, keeping the water. This is not that far in our world. This is something that's happening right now. And it's the lack of awareness. It's us, burying our heads in the sand and pretending like we're not in an emergency. That, to me, it's like, how it's hard. It's a hard thing to balance. You're like, okay, well, it's Halloween. I want to take my kids out. But you're also thinking, this act of commercialism and this whole holiday of, buying costumes and candies. And, there's so many things that we need to focus on. So it does become challenging and overwhelming. And I guess I'm just like here to put a real face on it, that it doesn't have to be always perfect. You don't always have to be strong. You don't always have to have the answers. You don't always win. But it's that persistence of believing and, You won't give up. You will get back up. You won't be silenced. The last 2 days I've had to do these talks. Yesterday I was with the Elementary Teachers Foundation of Ontario, helping to educate our educators. And I've been struck down with a sore throat, but I was like, no, I will not be silenced. I must share what I've experienced, what I've learned. And I don't claim to be an expert. You know, I'm very transparent about reclaiming my identity as a Mohawk woman and being dispossessed from my culture as a generational survivor of residential schools. I point to the experts, I point to my mentors, I point to the leaders, and I share how their knowledge, how these teachings have changed me and how they've impacted me and what I've seen with my own eyes. And when there's children in our country that feel like they don't exist, there is no way that politicians should be saying, you know, we're going to build a road anyways, and we're going to go and extract all of your resources. The resources of this country, what puts Canada on that international stage is Indigenous lands. So they should have the best infrastructure. They should have the best water supplies. They should have the best of everything, because without those resources, Canada wouldn't exist. So yes, let's continue. Let's have a dialogue. I'm here now, so we can chat. And I'm interested to hear all the different perspectives, because I think we do all bring something different to the table.
Miigwech, Layla. That was gorgeous. Like, the film is gorgeous. I hope everyone gets to see it. I wrote down so many notes while you were talking. I think the place I'll take us in is, you know, I think all of us have talked about the various ways we are coerced into extractivist relationships, whether we are academic researchers, whether we are Indigenous peoples just living our lives, or also being coerced into doing research and building knowledge and doing activism as a result of knowing the true cost of extraction. And you started talking a little bit about kind of the responsibilities that you have, the way that you're trying to like unstick yourself of these people, these companies, these Nestle water bottles, this Halloween candy. I'm wondering, yeah, if we all might say like, how are we grappling with it, right? Like, I'm here in my condo, like in Sacramento in the city, as you know, subway rages by, world's on fire. How are we grappling with our roles and responsibilities in the relationships that we're in? I know it's a big question. We could try to narrow it down. Ja, you're thinking.
Well, it's like honestly not well, but
Not
like
great.
I don't say that to sound like a broken record. I think that's actually just like I don't know, about a week ago I wrote down in my journal, I was like, what is this depression going to teach me? And I say that like as somebody who believes that depression, anxiety, grief, all of the potentially lethal affects are instructive. Like I believe these tell us something really important about our world and our place in it. But yeah, it's I think I also wrote something last week where I said that like mio pimatiso in this like good life is a struggle. That I think if but I don't mean that to garner empathy or to like marshal like personal individual support. I guess I'm saying that because I do really feel like well, I feel like Layla was just demonstrating, like, I think one of the only responses that pushes us somewhere else is a response that is willing to put our bodies on the line And yeah, I mean, in defense of water, in defense of land, in defense of life, I think those are the kinds of tactics which our time needs. But those are really difficult tactics. They're not tactics that
are socially acceptable.
yeah, they're not. They're criminalizing. I think like yesterday, somebody referenced Fred Moten and Stefano Harney's work on the undercommons, and that the only possible relationship to the university today is a criminal one, and that the undercommons isn't safe. Like it's not. It's always an unsafe neighborhood, I think, is their line. And I think like educating for that reality is a really important obligation of our times. Not to like educate for masochism, but to educate for like clear understanding of the importance of a material struggle against like compounding forces of violence that are bent on like the snuffing out of our life. That's not like abstraction. That's like that is so true. And I'm struck today also listening to both Essay and Layla's comments about that the internationalist kind of interconnected ways in which we're experiencing these struggles. It's not inconsequential that like necropolitics play out in long-term water advisories and in the shutting off of water in Gaza. These are embodied struggles that will require embodied response. And so, what does it mean to like live and work in the midst of that? I think it means we have to get very comfortable talking very openly about what our depressions, what our affective states of suffering, of pain, of grief, of loss, how they can be useful analytics for our time, and also guide our actions, how they point us to the places in greatest need of tender, loving care, even if that care takes the shape of defense.
Can I just
that's where I'm at. Yeah.
It's interesting you bring up that point of, you know, what action can we take? And I was speaking with a group of teachers, elementary school teachers, and I had one Instagram me, and she said, I've been thinking about what you told us all day. And she said, I woke up today asking myself, what would I be willing to get arrested for? And that simple shift of, you know, believing in something enough that you are willing to go against the law. I'm not saying go get arrested. I'm not telling these teachers to go arrested, but I'm telling them, you know, to question the law, to feel like there is a connection to a higher law when we talk about the water, when we talk about the land, when we talk about the very delicate balance of Mother Earth. And so, you know, that having a teacher do a project wall in her class of land defenders and seeing all these pictures of land defenders that she's teaching her kids about, giving them value, making them, you know, idols and heroes, but every single one on that wall has been arrested. That's changing a perception. That's changing a narrative of, you know, just because you've been arrested or you have a criminal record or you were in the, you know, silver bracelets doesn't make you a bad person, doesn't make you a bad guy. And so that simple act of questioning authority and realizing that when we see things that aren't right, we can say no. And the more of us that do it, the more powerful it becomes. So it's kind of like, I also had like a grade 5 come up to me and she said, you know, I'm in grade 5. I don't have any political contacts. And I was just like, oh, and she's like, what can I do to save the water? And I think a lot of us grown-ups feel like that grade 5. Like, what can I do? I am just one person. So one of the things I think is most important is reclaiming that relationship that you have with the water, with the trees, with the land, with life around you. Actually developing that bond and that love and that connection that the trees, the water, it is a familiar friend. It knows you. You trust it. You love it. And that is when you're willing to do things that you wouldn't do before. That is when you're willing to, speak louder than you've ever spoke before. That's when you're willing to question our comfortable lives to get uncomfortable. And I think that relationship connection to that's the secret. It's like if we had just learned that all along as children, if we'd all been taught that we're all connected, that everything is alive, water is alive, science is proving it now under the microscope, the water can hear us. It can hear the energy, it can hear positive, it can hear negative, it can hear hate, and it changes based on what it receives. It's alive. But we are not taught that. We're taught the H2Os and boiling points and all the scientific stuff. But it's that element of life force, of spirit force that connects us to the water. And it's so powerful for these issues of depression and mental health and overwhelm, just to sit with the water, to actually talk to a tree. It might feel weird, but it hears you. It resonates with you and you begin to know it. So yeah, I think that things are changing. I think that I have a lot of hope for movements that are happening within the university system. You're seeing new courses, new spaces for people to have these questions, to have these discussions, to create, this power force of the next generation that is essentially going to inherit this broken planet. So what are we going to do with it? How are we going to revive? What are we going to reclaim that has been lost? That is so important.
A question you asked that you said you posed to the teachers, like, what would you get arrested to? Or for, like, what would
she posed that
she
question
asked that
herself.
Oh my gosh.
She was like, I woke up thinking,
Who is she?
I know.
It's like a question. I feel like I think most of us working in the university have been asking ourselves and our colleagues this week in particular that question. And hoping for some good answers to come. Essay, do you have any? I see you're looking like you have some thoughts that are brewing.
That's my neutral face. Yeah, I was just listening. I do want to say, as a teacher, and I don't know who all is listening, but I do want to affirm that Black people are also Indigenous, African peoples are also Indigenous, and I want to make sure that is named here. I also, was thinking, listening to Layla, listening to Jeff, and just, for various reasons that I'll cry about later. My family, my kin in the Caribbean are on my mind right now. And, I was just thinking about my childhood and how, how my mom bucked a trend and took me to a doctor, and it was already a Babylon thing that that already is not what we do. And to think about depression and how it's personalized, and how a therapist told me recently about how I think my feelings and don't feel them, and going back to we haven't left, but the conversation on extraction, and I feel like I said it, but I don't think the actual word came out of my mouth. I mentioned racial capitalism, imperialism, such as colonialism, but alienation is the main one byproduct from us and our knowledges. And so another thing from also Layla's initial comments and thoughts after that phenomenal trailer, it's on just etymological level, to be that nerd, these are researchers, and it's actually the university putting a stamp and a brand on what research is, what is evidence, and what is proof, why we need it, that has us coming into these Babylon places to find out about ourselves. So that really resonated for me. And then we call it as studies. And then we say, well, it's Asian American studies or Black Canadian studies, and it needs a Black Canadian to do that. But then you can say, as a Black Canadian, here are the studies, and I know the thing, both in the group and of the field. And that one-to-one elision is extractive, it is alienatory, it is antagonistic. And it, has us, as Sylvia Winter talks to us about, mistaking the map for the territory. We're playing ourselves into coming to these places instead of taking those resources and burning the Babylon down. This isn't recorded, right? And so that was a joke. I say this obviously as a professor, so maybe like, I don't know, trying to reach the kids and be like, it's like hating from the inside of the club looking out, you know, where it's just like, can we curse on it? I know better. I'll just leave it this way. Like we know better. We know better so that we can do better. And some of the more transformative work that I have done is not in the academy. It's not a place of transformation. It's a place of extraction and co-option. It will move the boundaries, breathe them in, expand them and contract them to have the exact shape and formation just on the outside of us so that we're constantly looking back into it and inextricable. While we're looking for how to organize in the university, people are looking for tenure. While we're looking for tenure, they're buying up further bits of land. The university is one of the largest land owning entities of any city that I know and have lived in. The world over, in North America, this part of Turtle Island, in the Caribbean, at University of West Indies, in Europe. So then in Africa, in the quote unquote Middle East, which university thinking, anthropological thinking has even named us to say in ways that are supposed to be intelligible, like that's even a fucking place, excuse me. And so I'm feeling this quite forcefully and quite clearly. And I'm super welcome. I'm always like, call me on in, bring me inside, because it is a both and that I'm speaking from. I know the job that I have. I also know why I took it and what community work it would allow me to engender, what families I could fund so that they can go to school and they can go to work and they can get dialysis and they can do XYZ thing that we never had access to. I am here because of that. What funding I can funnel in the name of fields work and research to the people in organizing spaces that I could never begin to access or corral, or no amount of mutual aid fundraising and organizing would ever begin to touch the amount of resources that I can disseminate in this way. So it is to acknowledge this, but in terms of knowledge, in terms of cosmology, the university has no moral grounds, not this one, though also this one. None of them, no university, unless it's an open university, unless it's abolition university, open school, unless it is a few people that say, okay, man, like, my mother has a high school degree. So when I need to, shift and communicate, here's what my paper was about, which is what he told me when I graduated, cried with tears and like super proud, I got the PhD. And the one in the family who did that, she's like, you finished your paper with tears. Like, finally, you did that. And then part of me was like, okay, it was like 312 pages. Like, I had a lot of reference it. Like, actually, I worked really hard. It's not a paper, it's a dissertation, just in my head, And I was like, wait, what is that? Yeah, Mom, I finished my paper. Thank you. We did it. Mailed her my diploma same day. It is like in a drawer. She didn't even bother, but like it mattered to her when she got it. But it doesn't materially really shift anything for me when I think about it. Besides, it's very important. I mentioned to center that resource question on a financial tip, but that extraction, that alienation is something that for me it's hard to bear. It's hard to chew, swallow, etc. It consumes me as much as I try to like push back against it. It is formally, structurally, ontologically, if you want to, unwell making. And I think I'm at a place, I think collectively, and I'm hearing this from people's different perspectives and points of entry, collectively, such as we can ever become a we materially, beyond a place of trying to rehabilitate this thing, the same thing that has us looking for the bones of our family members that are being used to teach people what we mean by the forensic or the anthropological or by evidence. The same initiatives that, yes, you have the lab researchers, I've worked with forensic anthropologists, just as I talked about forensic anthropology or anthropology writ large and its colonial myth making of us in relation to one another, alienating us from one another. And when I have been in relation to like Watch the Med Alarm Phone and other organizing groups, I mentioned civilian missions or non-state sanctioned missions, sometimes under the name of NGO, which are being criminalized in police across the Mediterranean to not just save people's lives at sea, Mediterranean boat rescue operation for one material example that I've organized with, but also to find the remains right? Also, if we don't know the mysteries at the bottom of the ocean, like Clyde Woods told us, that they find them and they try to track back and say, here is who this was. Here we found, right? We found Abdul, we found Hijra, we found your relative. Is this them? Was this their document? Is this the proof that they were here? So you can bury your relation so that we can bury our dead and say that they were here and mattered to begin with. So I think about all of those things, and I know that universitarian modes of evidencing is not actually the way. That is not the keeper of knowledges. We are that. When we're talking about water, I obviously, like I said, have family in my mind, but hopefully it's coming off like, in a structured way of considering this for this conversation. A lot of the Black people that I know, including the ones regularly drowned at sea, meaning let to drown by various nation state formations, funded by research from us as a labor force, as though we are not people. A lot of Black people don't know how to swim. Our relationship to indigeneity, our relationship to cosmological belonging, all that we know of the river and the sea, all that we know of the trees and the mountains and the sky, all that we know of our deities have been systematically stripped away from us, repackaged, prepackaged, misarticulated in the name of Christian, white supremacist Christian ideology, in relation to other extractivist modes of what it means to be contemporary. My mother, with a high school education, the aunt that raised her, so raised us, had quote unquote less than that, could tell you the name of every leaf, could tell you what it could do, how if you muddle this together, if you have a stomach ache, if you have a headache, if your back hurts here, if the back of your knee aches, if your toe, but not the thumb, but the smaller toe to the right of that. There are things that we know that we're not getting from the university, and it's also by design. And I think sometimes I wish I were brave enough to respond in the ways that I was thinking about when Jeff was speaking about depression, and in the second round of remarks and comments there, that our bodies are already on the line. We are already in prison and incarcerated. We're in the prison house of language. We are in the prison house of neoliberalism. We are at the late stage of capitalism. And so for me, as an educator, having said all of that, I work at a university. I'm an educator besides this, in my artistic practice, in my aesthetic forms, how I communicate to my mother about what matters to us, how she would shiver and maybe say something about the Bible, because you can't fix everybody. But when I talk about how I learned feminism from her, I learned organizing from her, and she's like, what do you mean don't cause trouble? What do you mean feminism? Like, it's an F word for her, right? But I literally learned about the power of matriarchy, matriarchal relations, the power of learning what we could of the land, even as, we would get snatched up if we went beyond our calves. These knowledges are the things that we can build beyond institutional formations. And if more of us acknowledged it, we educate that our bodies are on the line. And so, Assata already said it, we have nothing to lose but our chains. It is not abstract. It is not conceptual. It's not a slogan that goes on signs. I've got great penmanship. It's been on some of my signs. But really materially, as Layla, I think, is conditioning us and urging us to think about, what does it mean if that is the case? And if we need evidence, maybe not necessarily in a book that comes out because of press rules and peer review and second peer reviewer number twos being a jerk kind of thing, and takes time, so that we are years removed from what is the knowledge of now, but we can actually communicate and inform ourselves and get armed with knowledge. Right? I just have a visa, so get armed with knowledge. And get a prize of what the real terms and the real stakes and the real conditions are. It is obviously not tenure. It is obviously, I really loved, Layla, just to bring it back, when you said, after you got back on after your trailer, you're not perfect, or nobody's perfect, or nobody's perfect, and really talked about making mistakes. I want to at least make sure that that is articulated here, because aside of extraction, I say this from just an embodied place, and I'm speaking to myself really as much as to everyone listening, the ability to make mistakes and to try to move towards good relation, to be willing to do that, to allow ourselves the error, is to acknowledge alienation itself, is to say, we've been structured into normative relations not relations like kin, but like these are the norms, these are the rules. Don't speak too loud. Don't make this demand. Don't push here. You're unprofessional. Well, I'm here, Black, trans, and for some reason alive, fundamentally unprofessional, fundamentally a mistake in the eyes of an anti-Black settler colonial world, this heteropatriarchy, and more besides. It matters then to me that I can say, here's what I know and how I know it. Here's how I heard that. Here's what I'm trying to do. Here's how I want to be free. Is that something to want? Do you want that also? And to make sure that we inform ourselves in those terms, because we have evidence. We have bombs. We know where they're from. We know who's paying for them. We have books. We know whose knowledge is and whose bodies they're at the expense of. We have the bones. And for me, that's enough. We've done enough of that. We know already. So maybe we need to shift then the terms, and fundamentally the disruption comes there. We look away from the next metric of any university saying that it's the #1 in Canada or the top 10 worldwide as of recent rankings. And we say, you're doing that through me. There's something that I already know that you knew to value. So I want to value it first. And so that's a little bit of what I was thinking.
Thank you, Miigwech. So kind of to sum, given its literal and material extraction, relationship with extraction, extractive tendencies, extractive bodies, the university obviously will never be decolonized. It'll never net good. As Jeff said, quoting the Undercommons, the only ethical relationship to the university, to these institutions, is a criminal one, a riotous one, a resistant one that takes the resources and puts them into actually the places we can build outside of institutional relations, right? Into the mutual aid, into each other. Layla said, follow the money. Jeff and I have been talking a lot about that lately. Follow the research chairs, follow the money. We are coming up close to time. I wanted to end, I'm not gonna say, let's end on a high note. We won't, we're all depressed. We will maybe though, end with some visions for Mino Bimatuan to come back to what we opened with. Jeff's lab wrote a beautiful solidarity statement with the people of Palestine using the good life. And I just thought maybe we could end with some visions for a good life. Layla?
Well, as in our teachings of the Haudenosaunee, we believe the good mind is always within you. You can always find it. And when you live with that good mind, it's mostly of gratitude. And so one of the things that has been, I guess, the skeleton key for me to feel grounded, to feel powerful, that I can do this work, is to spend that time. We call it the Ongeda Kariwedegwa, the Thanksgiving address, which translates to the words before all else. So nothing of significance would ever happen without first bringing our minds together to honor and put energy and respect and gratitude to all of those elements of life and creation. Now think about that. That actual speech in the Longhouse, it can take up to 3 hours, and people sit and listen to every word because it's that important. Now, when's the last time, we've spent 3 hours being grateful, even 5 minutes, sitting in our gratitude for all of the gifts that we have that make us rich right now? This is how we reprogram our capitalist mind, our mind that is always seeking more stuff, more recognition, bigger jobs, bigger cars. When we actually just sit in the richness that we have within us, it's like a recipe for total change. Because I can go for a walk with my elder in the forest, And he'll say, I am the richest man in the world. Looking around that forest, he is the richest man. And I never thought of it that way. My brain was never programmed to look at a forest and see that I was rich. But everything that we need is there. Now, I'm not saying go off the grid and go live in a cabin in the north, but understanding this connection that we have to all of the stuff, all of the accolades, all of the, the material essence of what is wrong with our society. And we let go. It might have been actually fate, because a few months ago I had a house fire and everything that I owned burnt to the ground. And it was like this awakening of just how I do not need stuff to make my home. My home is in my heart. My home is with the people I love. My home is a place of love and gratitude. And I'm so thankful for everything that I have. And it doesn't mean stuff. So us reprogramming that's it. If we can have enough people in our society that reprogram that, I mean, then we can change. Then we can break free from this wheel, this machine that we feel stuck in. So I say, go hug a tree and introduce yourself to it. Actually say, hi, I'm Layla. I'm 39 years old. I live on this territory. I love to sing. Nice to meet you, tree. I'm so glad we know each other now. And go back to that tree often. Give it updates. Tell it what's going on in your life. Develop a relationship with that tree. I've seen it happen. I've seen it in workshops of people who felt stupid talking to a tree. And by the third day of the workshop, they were sad to leave their tree. They were taking pictures. They were crying because they were going to miss their tree, because they had developed that relationship. And that's what's missing. That's the missing piece in all of the work, is that connection. And it seems so simple, but it's life-changing. It can change everything. And that's my hope. And that's why I have hope, because I know that it doesn't have to be super complicated. It doesn't have to be, a crazy revolution. It's a revolution inside of us that we can choose right now, and it can heal you. It is medicine. So that's my message of hope and inspiration.
I'm glad.
I'm not sure of a time check, but when I read something for 2 minutes. June Jordan wrote apologies to all the people in Lebanon, dedicated to 600,000 Palestinian men, women, and children who lived in Lebanon from 1948 to 1983, beginning from the first Nakba. She says, I didn't know and nobody told me, and what could I do or say anyway? They said, you shot the London ambassador, and when that wasn't true, they said, so what? They said you shelled their northern villages, and when UN forces reported that was not true because your side of the ceasefire was holding since more than a year before, they said, so what? They said they wanted to simply carve a 25-mile buffer zone, and then they ravaged your water supplies, your electricity, your hospitals, your schools, your highways and byways, and all the way north to Beirut because they said this was their quest for peace. They blew up your homes and demolished the grocery stores and blocked the Red Cross and took away doctors to jail. And they cluster bombed girls and boys whose bodies swelled purple and black into twice the original size and tore the buttocks from a 4-month-old baby. And then they said, this was brilliant. Military accomplishment. This was done, they said, in the name of self-defense, they said. That is the noblest concept of mankind. Isn't that obvious? They said something about never again, and then they made close to 1 million human beings homeless in less than 3 weeks, and they killed or maimed 40,000 of your men and your women and your children, but I didn't know, and nobody told me that. And what could I do or say anyway? They said they were victims. They said you were Arabs. They called your apartments and gardens guerrilla strongholds. They called the screaming devastation that they created the rubble. Then they told you to leave, didn't they? Didn't you read the leaflets that they dropped from their hotshot fighter jets? They told you to go. 135,000 Palestinians in Beirut, and why didn't you take the hint? Go. There was the Mediterranean. You could walk into the water and stay there. What was the problem? I didn't know, and nobody told me, and what could I do or say anyway? Yes, I did know it was the money I earned as a poet that paid for the bombs and the planes and the tanks that they used to massacre your family, but I am not an evil person. The people of my country aren't so bad. You can expect but so much from those of us who have to pay taxes and watch American TV. You see my point. I'm sorry. I really am sorry. I read this not despite the fact that Kristen asked for a somewhat positive note, but even in this, in the unyielding litany of loss and absenting and de-evidencing and erasure and annihilation on the bedrock of anti-Blackness, imperialism, settler colonialism, and otherwise that make modernity, in the contemporary formations that we might name depression, even if we mean sadness or even if we mean witness, for me, there is something possible in someone like June Jordan, whose poem that was, in a poet's word, in our individual collective capacity for witness, that does, in my darkest days, in the darkest nights, when the electricity is out, fill me with just unmitigated, overwhelming amount of joy. When Asada said to us, there's nothing to lose but our chains, when we talked about all this extractivism, ecological, psychological, and otherwise, I'm actually thinking that in this overt reckoning, in the obviousness of this litany, that not just taking care of ourselves, turning ourselves individually to nature, but leaning into the most important pronoun, I say to you, as a trans person, if that invalidates something for someone as we undo that work. Beyond the university, we have the pronoun we, and that is a fundamentally de-extractive work that we don't need to only hold the letter of apology, but we can live an apology that says tomorrow will be better for us, unchained and free together. Thank you for this fellowship, everyone.
Which, so I think that counts as a vision towards a good life. Jeff, you want to take us out?
Yeah, sure. I would love that.
Maybe just cry on the screen for like 10 seconds. We'll just cut it and
we are mostly made of water. We are the Red River. We are the cement of the city. We are workers. We are hurting and we are healing. We are scar tissue. We are many, many things. Some of us are more hopeful. Some of us hold hope, but we can experience hope with one another. And I think the good life as I see it, the good life as I understand it, is inextricably linked to being in good relationship with one another and the world around us. And that is to me, that's intrinsically about making the world habitable, making lives habitable. I want, to me, hope becomes materialized when we have a world worth living in. And so it's what inspires me about those tender acts of care that I see every day in university, in community, that propagate a future like free from these sort of forms of violence. And I think that means that we have to closely tether world ending with mending, and the rest I'll have to get back to you on in the future. But for me, the good life right now, making it happen, is going to be about ending certain forms, certain kinds of violence in the world, and mending our relationships with one another and the world around us. I don't often trade in this genre, despite being a therapist among many hats, because I think that there's this sort of this allure about bolstering our mood that I'm afraid of, because I think we want to often look away from that which is like deeply troubling. But I think what I found so beautiful here is like what's troubling is also so indicative of the things that we love. And I'm just deeply grateful also for the fellowship, also for the solidarity. And I hope I look forward, and I hope we have a good life that includes a good life for all of our relations, those that are presenced by such symbols, those that are presenced by our words, those that are present in what we drink. I think maybe that's where I'll stop. But thank you for the question and for this conversation.
And solidarity to our students at UTM.
Solidarity to our students.
I know what I would do in terms of going to prison, the question that Layla was asked. But for another call. Thank you, Kristen.
You're welcome. Miigwech everyone for watching. That was a really nice, actually, time. Remember, we're all water. Got to protect the water.
Question, where can we watch this replay anywhere?
Oh.
Can we see a replay of it? Is it live streamed on YouTube or anything?
Can we see what?
Yeah, it'll be live streamed on YouTube.
A replay?
Okay. Are we off?